Hi, everybody. My name is Joshua Vonderheide, and I am the founder of the Percussion Conservatory. And I'm very excited to be hosting Mr. Rob O'Brien for another episode of A Percussion Story. Rob is the assistant principal timpanist and section percussionist at the Dallas Symphony. And he and I go not way back, but pretty far back to our Rice days before I left from the Malaysian Philharmonic. And while I was in school with Rob, I just instantly knew that he was like the most calm, cool, collected, hardcore audition taker. Like you couldn't bug this guy. He's a marvel of the industry. It's been really, really great to be your friend and to get to know you, Rob, over the years. We're really excited to have you on. And I just want to jump right in to our first question so that everyone else can learn about you. If you could just tell us a bit about your early musical background, your first experience or experiences with percussion, and when you knew you wanted to major in percussion or music.
Sure. Thanks. First of all, thanks, Josh, for inviting me to this. This is the platform you have is really cool and a really great resource for everybody. And I think specifically this interview series is a cool thing because I think certainly when I in my early days in college, I looked at everybody who's a professional and they were sort of like they were all almost like godlike figures and it's cool to kind of have something like this where you can see that they're all just real people too. That's what I've really gotten from every single other interview that I've seen of these is they're all people with struggles and they're humans and it's a cool thing. So so thank you so much for having me. So I grew up in Connecticut. I grew up about an hour from New York City, and I think my earliest musical exposure is really from my parents who are not musicians but appreciate music and the arts and things, and certainly took advantage of New York City and taking me to all kinds of kids shows, youth concerts, Broadway shows, visual art, the Museum of Modern, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, things like that. The Museum of Natural History, just kind of exposing me to all this stuff that was there. Watching Fantasia a lot as a kid too, which kind of sticks out, as an early musical memory. And so when I was 7, my parents like a piano like showed up at our house, and it was like, oh, here's this thing that I'm going to start learning. And so I learned piano, and I loved it. It was great. It was a lot of fun. And then when I joined band in 5th grade, I chose percussion, and I was one of the like lucky few because like every like boy chooses percussion. So like I feel a long string of luck that's happened in my life. That was maybe the first one is that I got to do it. And by age 13, I started taking private lessons with a guy named Jim Royal who had a studio of students in the area that I lived in, and that involved first private lessons, and then he ran a percussion ensemble too. And I thought that just like opened up a whole world of everything that percussion includes, classical, drum set, steel pan, like all that stuff. And so that was like my favorite thing to do. It was like my favorite hobby basically. And I think my junior year of high school, that percussion ensemble I was in, we got to go to England and perform, and which involved all these extra rehearsals and things like that. And I remember feeling like so excited to go to every rehearsal. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, we have to rehearse 3 times a week now. It was like I get to go back tomorrow, and like do this. I felt that just excitement. And then I also got into all-state orchestra that year. I got to play timpani in the all-state orchestra, and that from there, I everybody kind of told me, like don't go into music. It's you don't make any money. It's too hard. It's whatever, blah blah blah. And I kind of from there thought after going to England and doing the Allstate thing, I was just like, no, I have to do it. I don't care. I don't like anything nearly as much as this, so I have to do this, and. And fortunately he's a great teacher in a lot of ways, but when I told him I wanted to audition for colleges and stuff, he really said like, well, then you have to push yourself to the next level and practice harder and do all this stuff. And I'm very grateful for that. And that's how
I
I
love
got.
that.
Yeah.
That's those huge shout out to all of the teachers out there, myself included, who teach like young students. I have I think 18 now students. I have a big studio since moving back to Texas, and it's like really, really fulfilling work. And it's not very often that someone is gonna go on to the full extent of a percussion career, but the it just enriches the entire musical community. It really does. It enriches like the entire country and kind of world in a way, to be
Yeah.
exposing young people to these concepts the same way that you're saying like that the Natural History Museum does. It's sharing those moments in art with someone, with a mentor that you really trust, and having those experiences is so important. And it can potentially make the difference in someone's whole life. Like it can shape their entire career pathway. So huge shout out. I mean, if you're in public school education out there and you're watching this, or you have a private lesson studio and you're teaching young people, keep on keeping on, man. It can be a tough fight. Public schools are tough. Those positions are really, really demanding. And you're talking about extra rehearsals and all this sort of stuff. It can be a lot of work, but it's so important, the work. And so huge shout out to your teacher. And let's continue on in that vein of your percussion teachers. If you could give us an overview of your percussion training and your prominent teachers, the schools you went to, the festivals you went to, all of these sorts of lovely things.
Yeah, I probably auditioned for 6 colleges or something, and the best one I got into was Boston University, was BU, and so that's where I decided to go. As soon as I got there, I started studying initially with Richard Flanagan, who's like the first call sub in the BSO, and then I started studying with Timpanist the next year, and I certainly felt very behind. Not knowing really how any of this, the music field in general, or orchestral auditions or anything, how any of this works. But I would see these grad students, practicing so many hours, and then these audition things that were like this like huge, just like unfathomable challenge to me. And I was kind of just like, I have to work so hard, I have to like practice. That's all I have to do, And so I thought, like, if I'm not going to succeed at this, if I'm not going to end up winning those auditions, which are so many years away from even beginning, it's not going to be because I didn't work hard enough, And so that's like what I did. I mean, I think I practiced like 10 or 12 hours every day. And a lot of that is extremely inefficient practicing. I would say like over half of that was probably not a waste of time, but was just ramming things over and over again. Not like good practice habits at all. But I'm glad I did it, because it instilled like that you can do these long days, and it's a slow process, but the payoff is real at the end of it. And Tim was obviously he talks about that was kind of his whole thing, was him practicing. And so that was a thing I pushed myself to kind of really just practice as hard as I could. And then once undergrad was finishing for me, I at the time there was quite a pipeline of BU and NEC students that went from one school to the other, and had a lot of success. So I thought that is, I should probably just, try and do that. So I ended up going to NEC just down the road and studying with Will Hudgens. And he was, also, he's one of the, most successful teachers in this field, I think. And he was just like, go, 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 take all these auditions, and very glad he did that to, too. That was the kind of mindset that he had. And because the thing about these auditions is like you got to play to win. You don't really hand them to you. You got to go, you got to learn, and like you only win if you show up. So I was glad, even though I probably was not nearly ready to win, I was glad that he made me get my feet wet. And then I finished at NEC, and I decided to go back to BU for like a performance diploma, and just more practicing. The facilities at BU are really excellent. It's like it's in a basement, and it's a little dark and things, but the instruments are nice, the rooms are nice, and you can spend as many hours as you want there. I mean, that's how it was when I was there. And then I finished that, and then I was kind of thinking like, how much longer am I going to do this? Because I still hadn't won an audition, obviously, and At that point, Matt Strauss started teaching at Rice, I had heard. So I thought, maybe I'll throw my hat in that ring. We'll see what happens, and got a good scholarship. And Matt seemed very inviting and already very positive and helpful. And so went down also to get a second master's degree, which was never really in the cards. I didn't set out doing this thinking I want to get two master's degrees, but I needed the practice space, I needed the instruction and all that, and that was another extremely formative experience for me. And I mean, as you know.
Yeah, Matt is very, very good at what he does. And so is Will and Tim and obviously everyone who you studied with. And now so are you, Rob,
Yeah,
which that's like the beauty of it.
yeah, I have to add that I studied with Sam Solomon too. He was also extremely helpful to me.
Props to Sam. I think I just saw a picture of Sam in a throwback picture with Michael Israelievich, where they were like getting the very first Vienna Pauker ever in like America in the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra. And they're like, it's a super funny picture of the two of them. They're just like all like huddled. It's like super
Cool.
cold in Minnesota, right? It's a great photo. So let's move on to some, more diving deeper types of questions. And the first one that I really like to ask to most of our artists who come on is just if there's been a defining moment in your life that that's had a significant impact on your career. So this could be something musical or could be something non-musical.
I don't know if there's a single kind of defining moment. I think I've had a lot of them. I think smaller or larger, or but I think this one that really sticks out that I still think about a lot, and I tell a lot of people if they come and play for me, is this. I took an audition once, and this person in the orchestra that I very much respect gave me the best compliment I've ever gotten, which is he said I voted for you because your playing inspired me, and that is all any of us want, is to come to a job and stand next to people that inspire us. And that sort of like flipped the light switch for me in the sense that that's what I needed to kind of look at these auditions as, is they're job interviews, and it sometimes to me, it can sort of, the grind of it feels a little bit like a note accuracy competition or something. And really what it is like these people want to hire somebody that is going to inspire and make coming to work better for them. And so I from there I sort of framed preparing each and every excerpt as an opportunity to show them like my musicianship. Of course it needs to be in time, in tune, right tempos and things like that, but like every single thing on that list has to be a like clear musical concept or a character or something like that this committee can grasp onto and really ultimately pick you instead of the other people. So I think that was sort of, once I started doing that and started framing it in that way, I had a long string of success at auditions, and it was much more it was less of a grind, I think, because I had another person I played for kind of said this thing about like he was talking about Bartok Concerto for Orchestra, the fourth movement timpani excerpt, and he was saying like, the non-percussionists, they don't know why this is hard, or they don't care, and that your job is to just convince them that like you can play it the way the piece sounds, and it's musical and interesting to them. And so when you think about it, most of these auditions, if the panel, especially the panel is large, like 9 or 11 people or something, most of the votes on that panel are non-percussionists. Like those are most of the votes you need to get through rounds and win. And the music director, who ultimately you need a yes from, might be a pianist, doesn't play in orchestra at all, maybe never has. So like once I started framing it in really just like showing off my musicianship, it made it a little more enjoyable to prepare, but it also kind of made it feel like, even though when I didn't win, it was still like crushing. It really was. But it was just like, well, there's probably a reason it didn't work out then. Maybe if it wasn't going to be the right fit then. If they weren't going to buy that, it wasn't going to be the right fit anyway, and it's okay. And one day they'll pick me instead of everybody else.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, it is so important. I had just reshared on our stories on Instagram for Percussion Conservatory quote, or kind of like a little clip from Bryan Cranston, who, if you're unfamiliar with him, he was like the lead in Breaking Bad or Malcolm in the Middle, the lead actor from those shows. He was just giving tips about acting and saying that you have to, when you go to audition, you just have to go and be the character and then leave. And it's like, and you can't get too caught up in how those people are going to think of you or what they think in that moment. And that's not your job to really to care about it. It's your job to go in and do exactly what you were just saying, Rob. It's like, it's your job to go in and create the most convincing, inspiring, musical, artistic way that you can in that moment. And then whatever happens from that moment's out of your control. There's nothing you can do.
Yeah,
You have that time with you on the stage that you can be very grateful for, that you've actually been invited to the audition, that you prepared hard, and then you leave it and then you walk away, unless you get called back for more rounds, and then you play more rounds. But that's,
yeah,
that's neither here nor there. So I really appreciate that, Rob. I really do. I think that's great for our audience to hear and to think about as we continue to do these auditions. And so one thing that you guys might not know about Rob is that he's actually won multiple positions. And so he's been principal percussionist of the Omaha Symphony before he was here at the Dallas Symphony. And he's also been, as he was mentioning, to a bunch of great schools, a bunch of great festivals. But there was one time at Rice, I remember having a conversation that we were both discussing how expensive school was. And so I'm a little bit curious, Rob, how you have managed, with doing multiple jobs and taking all these auditions, like you've mentioned, and going to these schools that are very expensive. How did you manage the student debt situation while working and pursuing auditions?
uh, yeah. Well, so it's exactly that. Is student debt is how I did it. Is there's a I borrowed a lot of money. I mean, I did. I borrowed a lot of money. I knew, every year it was more and more money, a lot of it was because living in Boston is so expensive. So even if I got a good scholarship at the school, it was like, well, rent is extremely expensive every month, and then on top of that, you got to obviously eat and everything, and I did have some part time jobs and gigs, but it wasn't even close to like covering all that, and then taking auditions is a major expense as well, and if you're trying to take every single one of them, I just ended up basically borrowing as much as I could every single year, because there's certain ways like I already owe 80,000. What's the difference between 80 and 85,000? Yeah, I mean that's exactly how is I always felt like I had this massive debt hanging over my head, and that certainly added to the pressure. It wasn't a great feeling, but now like looking back on it, it was like an exact number that like ticked up in my head, like every year. But now I kind of think of it as like that was the mortgage I paid on my career. I've heard somebody else describe it that way. That was the investment I needed to make, and fortunately, there is currently a government program called Public Service Loan Forgiveness that forgives your loans if you are a full time employee for a nonprofit, which orchestras are, which is extremely. It's a very lucky situation I find myself in as of right now. It, like I said, it was like a number that ticked up in my head, and I was always concerned about it. And now I got to say, like, there was some private loans I had to pay off that I did, but that the majority of it being federal loans. I don't exactly know the number now. It's just a monthly bill that I pay, and hopefully, if you're responsible, because that's the one thing is like you have to do all the work to keep track of this, is what I've noticed. But one day it will hopefully be forgiven, totally forgiven.
Right.
By the
And so,
way,
yeah,
in case you're curious, it was over $120,000 that I owed at one point.
that's wild. Yeah, I mean, it is, and that's, unfortunately, that's not an isolated incident at all, which is why I'm asking you
Yeah,
the question. I would never ask someone this question without first asking if it was okay to ask this question. So I asked beforehand, as like, Rob, are you going to be okay? Because it's kind of something I want to talk about, because we see so many students now going through school where they're coming out with that number, or it's sometimes nearly double that number. right?
Mm-hmm.
And the tuition only seems to be going up, and so it's very, very tricky. And it's very helpful to hear this, Rob, that there can be sort of this light at the end of the tunnel, but it is a risk, and you have to work extremely hard, and you have to make things work. Now, one thing that I would like to shout out is that one of the things that's made this possible for me is a sponsorship with Majestic Percussion. And so Majestic was extremely helpful for me getting instruments in my home and being able to become a private lesson teacher here in Houston. And I use these instruments on stage with the Symphony, and they're professional quality instruments. I love to have Majestic, instruments in my home and to use them. But even more importantly than that, they've been sponsoring this series that we've been doing, A Percussion Story, because they're going to donate scholarship winnings and instruments every year to our scholarship at Percussion Conservatory. So any way that you can find these scholarships, guys, find them any way that you possibly can. Apply to everything, and really take the school auditions extremely seriously, because that's, if you can just reduce that number when you're choosing a school, that can be so vastly helpful. I know that I made a lot of my decisions about where I went to school based on the financial packages that were being offered to me. So these are very real things. But huge thanks to Majestic for supporting percussion, for supporting Percussion Conservatory, percussion education. You guys rock. And that takes us to our next question. So another thing, Rob, that you had also mentioned to me before was that you wish that you hadn't been so discouraged by failure early on as a student. I didn't exactly know what you were referring to. I was wondering if you could kind of detail some of those early challenges and what advice that you could offer to students who might be going through something similar.
Yeah, I think what I'm saying is I took failure pretty hard. I mean, I think I still kind of do. It's something I wish I've tried to work on, and I've gotten marginally better about it. But yeah, I mean, just every time you get cut, every time I got cut, every time I didn't get into a festival or a school or whatever, it like crushed me. And that's, maybe not something you can work out in a practice room. That might be something you need to talk to a professional about, which I did many times. Very helpful. But I think it felt like when you take this audition, you prepare this huge list, and you practice all these hours, and you spend all this money to fly there, and then you get cut after 10 minutes, and you only played 10 minutes of the list, and all that other stuff you don't play that they ask for everybody who advanced and made finals and whatever. It didn't feel like a waste of time, but it felt just like it just hit me hard. It felt like I was like, now I'm bad. Even if I had a previous run of success, it was like, well, now I'm not good anymore. I actually, the first big audition, like full-time job that I made finals of, I then got cut at 5 in a row after that. And that was tough. I was kind of like, man, maybe that was a fluke, and I'm not actually, that I'm not going to be competitive anymore, and whatever, it's called disqualifying the positive and catastrophizing and all these bad negative thoughts that you're not supposed to think. But and so I think it's just, now looking back on it, and I think I thought it was going to be a linear process to success, to like winning a job, was that like you'd go and then you get in all the festivals and everything, and then you would get into a good grad school and full scholarship, and then advancing auditions, and then you finally win one. And it's not the case with me. It's not the case with a lot of people, I think. Yeah, it's just the journey is just like it goes where it goes. And I think it's partially because now I realize how much of the whole process is totally out of your control. Really comes down to like luck. I think like luck in a good and a bad way. I think, like I said maybe earlier, is it works out for a reason. Like they pick you to win the audition for a reason, because you were the best fit, or depending on how the audition process works, the music director thought you were the best fit. Sometimes the music director has a lot of power in these auditions. So, and that's what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to just play how you think it should go, hopefully execute as well as you can that day, which is a whole different thing, I think. And then they have to pick you instead of everybody else. So it's like all that is basically out of control. The only thing you can control is how you prepare. Really, that's Will Hudgens talks a lot about.
That's such a great segue. Please finish
No,
your
no,
thought.
no.
But
Yeah.
we are talking about the next question is: have there been practice or personal habits or routines that have contributed to your success? So maybe as you continue to answer that, you can
Yeah,
morph that into this question.
sure. Yeah, yeah, definitely. There have gone through several iterations of kind of how I prepare for these things, and but I think just ultimately what I've realized is the auditions that I've won, the final rounds that I played, did not feel as good as the final rounds that I didn't end up winning. There were a few auditions where I felt like I really nailed the finals. I got a good vibe from the committee. They asked me to change things, what, and I didn't win those. I lost, either for whatever reason or because I also lost. Those are really good players I lost to, and so that's the other is you have everybody else is doing exactly this, is working super hard, sounding super good, executing at an extremely high level. And I wish, it, like, I wish I could sit here and say that, like, in Dallas especially, that they told me, like, oh, you were the best by far and it wasn't even close, and we did. And that's not what happened. It came down to a few things, and the music director liked my Bach a lot, just, and that's like a totally subjective thing. And it just, the ones that I ended up winning really just felt like, oh wow, like they picked me. Like, today was my day, for whatever
Yeah.
reason. And so, I mean, yeah, so basically, like, the personal practice habits and things, that the ones that really worked for me was all about, first of all, preparing everything the way you want it to sound, and then it's a whole nother battle to try and execute it on the day the way you want, which is never going to be perfect. But I developed kind of a system, I thought, that really piqued my confidence. That was really what it was about. Was I spoke. Matt Strauss was very helpful with this, and Matt Howard was also extremely helpful with this, as trying to pique my confidence on the day of the audition. And that kind of came down to the way I would play a lot of mocks for people. I would record myself a lot. I would record and listen back with the metronome clicking and try and line that up so I knew my time was solid. And once you could do that, like, I don't know how many times, like 5 times in a row or something, it was like, okay, like, time is pretty good. There's always going to be a few little, I mean, you could drive yourself nuts doing this. But and then when you play mock auditions for people, it was important to play for the non-percussionists, because those are the ones that I think a lot of them sit there and they say, like, oh, well, I don't know. But I think, and it's just like, just tell me what you think, because this is most of the committee doesn't play percussion and I need to sell it to these people, and but I would only do the mock audition. I would record them. I would listen back, even when I was like really shaky, really nervous. If it always sounded better than it felt, like in the moment, I remember feeling like, oh, it was horrible. I listened back, I was like, it was not that bad, And then once those, I felt confident in those, it started all like going well, I would stop, because it almost was like a box to check. It was like, now I'm playing under pressure well. I first box was, I know it's all in time and it sounds the way I want it to sound from my recording. Then I know under pressure I can do it. And then the next thing I would do is I would practice starting every excerpt over and over again incessantly, because, like, if you think, it's really a lot of the soft excerpts are the hard ones to start, like Kiji, Rachmaninoff. I think a lot of people maybe that went to school with me at Rice know I would just open the door, grab the soft cymbals, and just set up and play the first Rachmaninoff crash and like put it back, and then I would just like do that almost every time I walk by, because that's just one excerpt that's like kind of the same thing a bunch of times in a row. So if you can get the first one, that's like the hardest one. And so once I could definitely start them all, the way I wanted to, that was another box check. And then I would, in Houston especially, like, I would leave. I would play golf. Like, I
Mhm.
would do something else, because it was just like, done, done, done. I'm playing everything the way I want, and there's no reason to expect that it's not going to go the same way when I get there. And that was how I kind of piqued my confidence when I finally got to the audition. That was the biggest, most helpful strategy that I used, for sure.
I like that Rachmaninoff is now simplified to just a little crab claw
Yeah,
pincher, just ka-tung, ka-tung, ka-tung. That's all we need, guys. We just need a crab claw and we're good to go. Um, Rob, I read an interview about you in getting ready for this interview that you mentioned that Pines of Rome was a particularly impactful piece for you, and I want to know why.
That was the piece we played at All State Orchestra when I decided I wanted to do this, and I got to play timpani on it, which is an amazing timpani part, and the whole piece is really incredible. And I was still just so green, even though I got to be the timpanist in the All State Orchestra, like I was still 16. I didn't. I think I like probably listened to one recording, and that like, but I didn't study the piece. And I remember like being, you go for, it's like a 3 day thing. You go and stay in a hotel and rehearse. And I was just like, wow, this is so cool. This piece is so good. And the timpani part is so awesome. Like, and that piece especially, it's so programmatic and it's very clear what he's describing. And so that was the piece where I was just like, I have to do this. I don't care if you don't make any money. Like, this is so much fun. Like, yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, the first time I ever played timpani with an orchestra, it was Medea's Meditation and Dance of Vengeance, and then Symphonic Metamorphosis on the same program. And it's like the one recording that I have. And like, to be fair, I was 14. Like, to be fair, same thing, all state. It's pretty okay. Like, it's like, I'm like, that's pretty all right. Like, I was pretty proud of it. No one's ever listening to that recording, though.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, yeah, it's pretty good. You'll never
Yeah.
hear that. That's never going to happen. But
Yeah.
those moments are very, very impactful. Is the word that I would use. Like, it almost feels like meteor impact. Like, it just moves you. Like, you're changed sometimes after these experiences, those early experiences as a young musician. When you hear these pieces that are so grand, you just feel like you tap into something bigger than yourself. That's the way I felt about it. I was like, this is bigger than Josh Vonderheide. It's like feeling like the same. I felt the exact same way the first time I went surfing, or maybe you can feel the same thing when you're playing golf or something. When you're just like sort of out in this expanse, and you're like, I am insignificant. Like, there are all these things happening around me that are just so amazing. And then you get to have your moments. It's like there are some special times for you, but do you have anything else in your life, Rob, that's been as impactful for you that you feel like really moved you or changed you as much as something like Pines of Rome at Allstate?
I don't know. I went, I had kind of the similar thing where you're in this vast expanse of things, and you feel sort of insignificant, but also very happy to like be a part of it. Is went to a few national parks over the summer, and I went to the
Mm-hmm.
Joshua Tree in California, and yeah, and I don't know if anybody's ever been there, but it's like, and we went in the middle of July when it's like 105 degrees out, and so there's barely anybody there, and it's brutally hot, but it's incredible. Like, just the vast silence, emptiness, and there's this one part. Everybody knows the Joshua trees, but there are these other cactuses that are just, there's this one, little part you drive through, and these cactuses just cover this small valley in the middle of the park. And I think they said there's like hundreds of thousands of them, and you're just like among them, and it's totally silent because there's nobody around, and it's like unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, it's very inspiring. It really is. It's like, and so now my wife and I were like planning all these next national parks trips and stuff. And when you look at the cool one, like Arches in Utah, which is these amazing sandstone arches, and there's some other ones like that in Utah. Yellowstone's big. All these actually, they exist because of these like natural processes that the earth goes through, erosion because of wind and water and all this stuff. And so like the sandstone arches look that way because of a series of processes that happened. And like, it didn't look like that at one point in the history of earth, and it won't look like that in a few 100,000 years or millions of years or something. And it's like an amazing snapshot in time of the earth and what it does in nature, and it's pretty incredible. I think that
Guys,
that
don't
has nothing
don't
to
even
do with music.
don't get Rob started on national parks. Don't get
Yeah.
Rob started on airport taxes. All right. If you get Rob started on airport taxes, he'll tell you why certain airports are more expensive to land at than others for 30 minutes because he watched a documentary. If you know Rob well, one thing that you get to know about him is that he's like a scholar of detail on things that he's interested about. And your memory, dude, is like elephant, like just crazy, just really, really deep level memory on things that you're like, how did you remember this from like the tour guide from years ago or whatever? You know, it's awesome. So I appreciate that. It's one of my favorite things about you, Rob. And I would like to now ask you, just you know, kind of in a similar way, these things that are impactful, but maybe now looking more inwards of something that you've done, not something that's happened to you, but something that you've done that you've been able to put out into the universe. What you consider your greatest professional achievement so far?
Yeah, I actually think about this a lot because I don't know if I have a single greatest achievement, but I think about, I have a list in my head of the best concerts I've played that felt, the best. Even not even listening back and thinking like, oh, that was the best it ever sounded. Just like the feeling that I got in the concert, and the list grows every year. It's kind of cool, and I feel very lucky that at one point it was a definitive list, and now it's just like a very long list, and they're not ranked and stuff. But I think one of the coolest things I got to do was to play Escapades with Branford Marsalis when I was in Omaha. That was the 100th anniversary concert. It was the music director Thomas Wilkins' final concert. It was kind of the only like big audience concert we did in the pandemic. It was June 2021,
Mm-hmm.
and it was Escapades. I finally got to play that piece, and I have a Branford was very cool to me, and I have a picture of us in my living room that we look like we're best friends. He was just like, it was so cool to me. He when there's like a soloist meeting with the conductor for every concerto, and I had to be part of that one, obviously. And they did it on stage because it wasn't just going to be in the dressing room, because there's a vibraphone and a bass and everything. And so like we're having this meeting at the front of the stage. All the percussionists are like in the back. I knew they were watching, and Branford did not speak to me. Like, he didn't introduce himself at first, which I was okay with, but I was just like, he's here to work. We're all here to focus.
Yeah.
And we go through the whole, just us, we go through the whole piece. And it wasn't until, the middle excerpt in the third movement, like the long one, the first time we played that, at the end of it, he this is one of the coolest things that ever happened to me. He just kind of looks at me. He goes, okay, yeah, okay, okay.
Okay. Uh-huh.
And I was like, okay, I think I made the good impression finally, and from
Yeah.
then on, yeah, he was so cool. That was definitely, yeah. And then I was thinking today about this is at Tanglewood, I got to play timpani on this unbelievable Copeland piece, Orchestral Variations, with Michael Tilson Thomas, and that's definitely up at the top there. It's epic, epic part, epic piece, and at that place with MTT, that was pretty unbelievable too.
It's really cool. We've spent so long trying to develop the craft. I do feel this way a little bit. Like, we are artists, but as percussionists, a lot of what we do is like, you're a craftsman almost. It's like you spend so long refining because of the nature. I think even more specifically than other classical music instruments, of what we do in auditions. It's like a craft. It's like being a woodworker or something, where you're not just gonna play it and it's musical. You're gonna refine it, and the time and the tempo and every color and the exact stick choice and the exact instrument choice and the resonance of the room. And the percussionists get really like just super narrow minded almost, in a good way. It can be, sometimes it's too much, but in a good way. And so we spend so much time just developing this skill set that we do, that when finally we get to put it to use in something like, I'm going to play Escapades now, and you're feeling like this is a real part. It's like this is actually like super difficult, and I get to use every tool in my toolbox, and I'm playing with other people who are at the highest level on their instrument, and you're being seen, and yeah, it's just such a good feeling. And so those,
Yeah,
they're super rare for us as percussionists, but I can almost feel, thank you for sharing it. I can almost,
yeah,
I
yeah.
I'm living it, adjacent to your
Yeah.
story. I'm living
Let me
through you vicariously.
Yeah, I want to tack on to that. This thing I heard at one point, Tim Jennis said this about you when it reminded me when you were talking about craftsmen and working so hard and stuff. Is he said this one? I think I was telling him, I was like, man, I don't know, like, I probably had gotten cut at an audition, and I was like, I don't know, I guess I thought I was good, but apparently not, or I don't know if am I just prolonging the inevitable by like going down to Rice, more school, like more,
Mm.
like. And he told me this thing, and I heard it from a few other people, and it's definitely true. Is he said, "You're not going to believe this, but one day you're going to miss this." And I think what he means is you're not going to miss losing the audition. You're not going to miss getting cut. That is not fun. But like you're going to miss the time you spend working so hard on what you're passionate about, getting it to the absolute highest level you can be for hours and hours every day. That doesn't exist in an orchestral career. It just doesn't. Not for percussion, not that I've found. So you'll never work as hard on something you care about as you will taking auditions. And I my so far he's absolutely right. It really is like it's a cool thing you get to do, even if you have to do it a bunch of times.
That's beautiful. I love that. That's such a nice way to think about it. I wish someone had said that to me when I was a little bit younger. Like, "Oh, you'll miss this." I remember just throwing sticks against the wall at
Oh
Juilliard,
yeah.
just against the wall. And yeah, it can be a trying experience. But I would agree, now that I'm running a platform full time, and now I'm helping out with ITI, and I'm playing at Symphony, and I'm teaching kids, and I'm about to have my own first kid.
Yeah, yeah.
Like all of these things, it's like really a lot of time. It takes a lot of time, and you're not spending like 10 to 12 hours a day in a practice room by yourself. You have priorities to other people
Yeah.
outside of yourself. And so it's a really beautiful way of looking at it, and we should all be really grateful for that time that we have. So if you're currently going through that time, enjoy it if you can. Good luck.
Yeah.
Rob, what's something most people don't know about you?
I think you said earlier I seem to know a lot of useless trivia. A lot of things seem to stick in my head there. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't. Yeah, I don't. I actually, I would say I wasn't the most like motivated student in high school. I got good enough grades to just kind of like get by and not have my parents be on my case and stuff. And that was good enough for what it was good enough for me. And then when I got to college, I could care less about the real classes you had to take. I just wanted to play drums, and so I got the worst grades. All That's all to say that now I just love learning. I love
Uh,
reading. I found in the pandemic, like I started reading a lot, and I just love kind of learning things. And yeah, I mean, it's a good. I think like somebody said, like once you stop taking auditions, that like focus, that mental energy needs to be put somewhere else.
mm,
And it can be, a lot of people get into exercise, other hobbies, other aspects of music, or family time, or whatever it is, and I think like so for right now, that's like kind of one of my things. I think a lot of people are also surprised, I guess, is just I'll say how many auditions I did take. Is most people kind of their eyes kind
what's the
of
number? What's the
yeah.
number?
So I will say I only this only counts tenure track positions. So because I always thought like if this tenure exists in this audition, at the end eventually, I can somehow cobble together a career in music with this. And so that doesn't include any festivals. That doesn't include New World, which I took 5 times, by the way. So I've taken 39 auditions, and I've won 3 of them, uh, which feels very lucky, And it worked out when it needed to work out. The Houston Ballet was like number 25, Omaha was 29, and Dallas was 38. So yeah, I mean, I hope that gives people I don't know, confidence or hope or something. It just
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
did not plan on losing 36 auditions, but it doesn't matter now because the ones that I won and coming in and fitting in and getting tenure really felt very natural, felt very easy, and I think there's a reason that happened.
Well, unlucky number 13 is lucky number 13 for you. You win an audition 1 out of 13 times.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, I guess so. How about that? Yeah.
That's the percussion stories piece of useless trivia for everyone out there. Rob
Yeah, there you
O'Brien
go.
wins an audition 1 out of 13 times. But no, not. And by the way, not useless trivia. Very good trivia. Very, very good. Informative, important. I mean, look, at years later, I still remember that. If I'm on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, like I'm calling you. You're my phone a
Okay,
friend.
yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not useless. Not useless. But Rob, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for joining us here on A Percussion Story. And thank you just for being an awesome person in the community. I became a better percussionist because of you, because of the time I spent around you. I know all your colleagues think of you extremely highly. I know that everyone that you come in touch with is a better person for having known you. And you were like, while we were there at Rice, you were one of like the total rocks of the studio, just always encouraging the young ducklings to, just keep swimming. And for the rest of us who had been doing it for a little while, you were a huge motivation and just a source of creative input and someone that I felt like I could really look up to a lot. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing all the knowledge. And I can't wait to hear you play with Dallas more often. Or when do you guys, when are you like live streaming your next thing? What's the next thing going on in Dallas for you?
Yeah, so this week we got John Williams pops, and then we have just one pops thing the next week, and then like Mahler 5, German Requiem. We're doing the Ring Cycle coming up. We got a European tour in June, which I'm super excited about. So yeah, I mean it's really busy. All of our class concerts are recorded and posted to our YouTube page like 2 weeks later. Just if anybody wants to check any of them out. And yeah, Josh, thank you. That was very kind words. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for your friendship over the years and everything. And I've really valued that. And thanks for inviting me to be a part of this. This was really fun. Really enjoyed talking about it.
Awesome. Well, guys, it's been another great percussion story today with Rob O'Brien, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.